It wasn't one massive betrayal that shattered my world. It was the cracks, the little fractures I hadn't seen or hadn't wanted to see. Looking back, I realize now that the first one appeared on an otherwise uneventful Tuesday. It was so small, so insignificant, that I almost ignored it. Lisa was in the kitchen, her phone face down on the counter as she stirred a pot of spaghetti sauce. Our daughters, Emma and Claire, were chasing each other around the living room, their giggles filling the house. It should have been another peaceful evening, but something was off. I'd walked into the room just in time to catch Lisa glancing at her phone with an expression I couldn't quite place. Her lips curled into a soft smile, and for a second, her eyes seemed brighter, excited, even. But the second she noticed me, she flipped the phone over and turned back to the stove. "What's got you smiling?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Oh, nothing," she said, too quickly. "Just a funny meme from work." It was a harmless enough response, but the way she avoided my gaze and busied herself with the spoon left a pit in my stomach. Lisa wasn't usually evasive. If anything, she was the more open one between us. But that moment, it lingered, sticking in my mind like a splinter. I brushed it off, telling myself I was overthinking. I kissed her on the cheek, helped set the table, and carried on like nothing had happened. But the splinter stayed, and the more I tried to ignore it, the deeper it dug. The second fracture appeared a few days later. Lisa was packing for a 3-day conference in Chicago, something she'd been dreading for weeks. "It's just a lot of schmoozing," she told me. "I hate that corporate fake smiling crap." I helped her fold her blouses into the suitcase, trying to lighten the mood. "Well, at least it's a nice hotel, and no kids climbing into your bed at night." She chuckled, but it felt forced. "Yeah, I guess." As she zipped up the bag, her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She didn't reach for it right away, and I might not have noticed it at all if not for the name that flashed on the screen. Marcus Reed, her boss. "Work stuff?" I asked, keeping my voice casual. "Yeah," she said without looking at me, her tone clipped. "Marcus just wants to go over the schedule." Another harmless answer, another subtle shift in her demeanor. I didn't push. I'd met Marcus once at a company event. A sharp dresser with $1 million smile and a handshake that lingered a little too long. I hadn't liked him then, but I'd chalked it up to jealousy. He was the kind of guy who made other men feel small, whether he meant to or not. "Don't let him work you too hard," I joked, though the words felt bitter on my tongue. Lisa just smiled, that same tight, practiced smile she'd been using more and more lately. The third fracture came when Eric texted me. Eric and I had been best friends since high school, the kind of guy who could always call you on your crap and still buy you a beer afterward. He knew Lisa from the occasional double dates, but they weren't exactly close, which is why his message caught me off guard. "Hey man, weird question. Lisa's at the Goldworth conference this week, right?" I replied quickly. "Yeah, why?" The dots appeared as he typed, then stopped, then started again. His hesitation made my chest tighten. "I saw her at the hotel bar tonight. She looked different. All dressed up. Was she meeting a client or something?" I stared at the screen, rereading his words. Lisa dressed up? She rarely wore anything but business casual for work events, claiming she hated the pretense of trying too hard. And why hadn't she mentioned going to the bar? "I don't know." I typed back. "Did you talk to her?" Eric's response came faster this time. "No, but she was with a guy. Looked pretty cozy. Thought it might have been a co-worker or client, but I figured you'd know." My heart sank. "What guy?" "Tall, dark hair, sharp suit." I think he called her Lisa, but I couldn't hear much over the music. The description fit Marcus to a T. That night, as Lisa FaceTimed me from her hotel room, the pit in my stomach grew deeper. She looked radiant, her hair styled, her makeup flawless, her smile warm. "I miss you," she said, her voice soft. "How are the girls?" "They're good," I replied, studying her face for any sign of guilt, any crack in her polished exterior. "Busy day?" "Exhausting," she sighed. "I'm about to crash. I just wanted to hear your voice before bed." Her words were perfect, her tone flawless, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was horribly wrong. By the time I crawled into bed, I felt like I was lying next to a stranger, even though Lisa was hundreds of miles away. I stared at the ceiling, replaying Eric's message, her odd behavior, the look on her face when she flipped her phone over in the kitchen. One thought kept circling in my mind, relentless and unshakable. What if she's lying? I didn't have proof, just gut feelings and unanswered questions. But that night, the fractures in our life turned into cracks, and I knew it was only a matter of time before the whole thing came crashing down. The morning after Eric's text, I woke up in a fog. My mind churned with questions I couldn't answer, doubts I couldn't shake. Lisa's laughter still echoed in my head from the FaceTime call, but now it felt hollow, like it didn't belong to her anymore. Something wasn't right, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. I told myself I was overreacting, but the thought didn't stick. Eric wasn't the kind of guy to stir the pot without reason. If he said he saw something, he saw it. The question was, what exactly had he seen? That afternoon, while the girls were napping, I sat at the kitchen table staring at Lisa's laptop. It was nothing new. She always left it at home during trips. But today, it felt like a door I wasn't sure I wanted to open. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the lid. We had always been open with each other. No passwords, no secrets. Yet sitting there, I felt like a thief in my own home. But the nagging doubts wouldn't let me go. I flipped it open. Her email was still logged in. I scrolled through her inbox, searching for anything that might explain Eric's message. Most of it was mundane: company memos, client updates, schedule changes. I almost closed the laptop when a name caught my eye: Marcus Reed. The subject line read, "Thanks for last night." My stomach clenched. I clicked it. The email was short, casual, but it sent chills through me. "Lisa, I couldn't stop thinking about how stunning you looked last night. Thanks for your company." It made the evening bearable. "Looking forward to next time. Marcus." Next time. Those two words hit like a slap. I sat there, my pulse pounding in my ears, reading and rereading the email. Stunning? What the hell was he talking about? Lisa hated corporate events. She always said they were stuffy and insufferable. But now it seemed like she was the life of the party. For him. I closed the laptop, shoving it aside as if touching it burned. My mind raced, every memory of her recent behavior clicking into place like pieces of a sinister puzzle. The flipped phone, the evasive answers, the FaceTime call where she looked too perfect to be crashing after a long day. It all pointed to one thing. I needed proof. That night, after putting the girls to bed, I installed tracking software on Lisa's phone. I'd never considered doing something like this before. It felt wrong, invasive, but I couldn't trust her anymore. I needed to know the truth, no matter how ugly it might be. The software was simple enough to use, and within minutes, I had access to her texts, call logs, and GPS history. It felt like crossing a line I could never come back from, but I pushed the guilt aside. I wasn't the one who had broken the rules. If Lisa was lying to me, I deserved to know. The logs updated in real time. Her most recent messages were to Marcus, confirming my worst fears. "Can't wait to see you again tomorrow night. Same place." Yes. Room 804. My breath caught. Room 804. A hotel room. I scrolled further back, my heart pounding as more texts filled the screen. They weren't explicit, but the undertones were clear. "You make these trips worth it. Careful, Marcus. Someone might catch us. Let them. You're worth the risk." I slammed the laptop shut, my chest heaving. The room spun around me, and for a moment, I thought I might be sick. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. This wasn't paranoia. It was real. Lisa was cheating on me with her boss. The next morning, Eric called. "Hey man, did you check in with Lisa?" he asked casually. I clenched the phone tighter, my voice tight. "Yeah. She says it's all work stuff. Nothing to worry about." There was a pause. "You sure?" I saw her again last night. She was with the same guy. What were they doing?" I asked, my throat dry. "Talking, laughing." "She looked different, Greg. Happy, but not in a just got promoted kind of way." I thanked Eric and hung up before he could say more. The cracks in my life were growing wider, threatening to split everything apart. I wasn't ready for what was coming, but I didn't have a choice. The fractures were now impossible to ignore. Lisa was living a double life, and I was about to uncover every lie she'd told. When I first installed the tracking software, I thought it would give me closure, proof that my suspicions were just paranoia. Instead, it opened a door I couldn't close. The texts, the emails, the call logs, they painted a picture far worse than I could have imagined. Lisa wasn't just cheating. She was a stranger living in my house, wearing my wife's face but playing a role I didn't recognize. The messages between Lisa and Marcus were bad enough. Flirtation, private jokes, the occasional late-night rendezvous. But the more I scrolled, the deeper the rot went. It wasn't just Marcus. Another name appeared in the logs, Ethan Turner, the COO of her company. At first, I didn't believe it. One affair was devastating, but two, it seemed impossible. Yet, the evidence was right there. Text with Ethan that mirrored her messages with Marcus, filled with suggestive comments and veiled promises. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. How long had this been going on? How had I missed it? Late one night, after Lisa had FaceTimed me from her hotel room, I finally listened to the call logs. The software had recorded her conversation with Marcus earlier that day. Hearing her voice, warm and teasing, felt like knives in my ears. "Did you book the room?" she asked, her tone light, almost playful. "Of course. Same as last time," Marcus replied. "Good. I'll make up an excuse to leave dinner early. I'll be waiting," he said, his voice dripping with confidence. My fist clenched so hard my nails bit into my palm. Every word confirmed what I already knew but had been too afraid to admit. This wasn't a fling. This was a pattern, a second life she had crafted while I stayed home raising our daughters, oblivious to the truth. The next day, I called Eric. I needed someone to ground me, to keep me from spiraling further. But as soon as he answered, I hesitated. How could I explain this without sounding pathetic? "Eric," I finally said, my voice shaking. I think she's been lying to me." There was a pause, then a sigh. "Greg," I didn't want to say anything, but something didn't feel right. "That guy, Marcus, I saw them again last night. And, well, it wasn't just him." "What do you mean?" I asked, my heart pounding. "She was with another guy, older, looked important. They were sitting close, like close. It didn't look professional." "Ethan." "It had to be," Eric continued, his voice cautious. "Greg, are you okay? Do you need me to do something?" I swallowed hard, trying to steady my voice. "No, I'll handle it." I hung up, my mind racing. Every piece of evidence I gathered felt like another crack in the foundation of my life. But I couldn't stop now. I had to know everything. That night, I stayed up late, combing through Lisa's messages and emails. I found a pattern, subtle but damning. Messages to Marcus often mentioned strategy or timing. Messages to Ethan referenced deals and clients. At first, I thought it was corporate jargon, meaningless chatter. But as I pieced it together, a darker picture emerged. They weren't just colleagues. They were partners, in more than one sense. Lisa wasn't just cheating on me. She was helping Marcus and Ethan embezzle money from their company. I found spreadsheets buried in her email, records of falsified transactions and redirected funds. The amounts were staggering, hundreds of thousands siphoned into offshore accounts. My breath caught as the realization hit me. Lisa wasn't just lying to me. She was breaking the law. By the time I closed the laptop, the sun was starting to rise. My body ached with exhaustion, but my mind was sharper than ever. I needed a plan. Confronting her wouldn't be enough. She'd lie, twist the truth, make me feel like I was overreacting. No, I needed to be smarter. If she was going to destroy our family, I wasn't going to let her walk away unscathed. I spent the next few days gathering everything, screenshots, emails, call logs, recordings. I compiled them into a folder labeled evidence. It felt clinical, methodical, like I was building a case for court, and maybe I was. At that point, I didn't know what the endgame was. I just knew I needed leverage. Then came the tipping point. One night, while I was reviewing the tracking logs, a new notification popped up. Lisa was at a bar near her hotel. It wasn't unusual. She often had work dinners during trips. But this time, I checked the GPS coordinates. They didn't match the restaurant she'd mentioned earlier. Suspicious, I activated the software's live microphone feature. The sounds of laughter and clinking glasses filled my headphones. Then I heard her voice. "You're late," she said, her tone playful. "Sorry, Honeybee," Marcus replied. "Got stuck with a client." Honeybee. That was my nickname for her. I yanked the headphones off, my hands trembling, my vision blurred with anger, my mind racing with thoughts I couldn't control. This wasn't just infidelity. This was humiliation, and I wasn't going to take it anymore. That was the moment I decided to act. When Lisa walked through the door that evening, she carried the same confidence she always had. Her heels clicked against the hardwood floor, and she tossed her bag onto the couch like it was any other day. Her face lit up with a practiced smile, but this time, I wasn't fooled. "Hey, honey," she said, leaning in for a kiss. I turned my head just enough for her lips to land on my cheek. "Welcome back," I said flatly, stepping aside to let her walk past. She paused, glancing at me, her smile faltering. "Everything okay?" "Fine," I said. My tone betrayed none of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Lisa headed upstairs to unpack, calling out, "I'll be down in a minute. Let me say goodnight to the girls first." I waited in the kitchen, my hands gripping the counter as I replayed the evidence in my mind. The texts, the emails, the audio of her laughing at Marcus's terrible jokes. Honeybee. That name had lodged itself in my chest like a shard of glass. When Lisa came back down, she looked relaxed, almost relieved. She poured herself a glass of wine and leaned against the counter across from me. "How were the girls while I was gone?" "They missed you," I said, my voice low. "So did I." Her smile returned, this time softer, more genuine. "I missed you too." She reached out to touch my arm, but I pulled back. "Lisa," I began, my eyes locking onto hers. "I need to ask you something." Her hand froze mid-air before retreating. "Sure," she said, her voice cautious. "Are you happy?" I asked. The question caught her off guard. She blinked, her brows knitting together. "What kind of question is that?" "Just answer it," I said, my voice steady. Lisa hesitated, then gave me a small nod. "Of course I'm happy. Why wouldn't I be?" "Because I'm not," I said, letting the words hang in the air. Her face fell. "Greg, what are you talking about?" I grabbed my phone from the counter, scrolling to the photo Eric had sent me. The one of her and Marcus at the bar, sitting close, his hand resting lightly on hers. I turned the screen toward her. "What's this?" I asked. Her eyes widened, the color draining from her face. She stared at the photo for a moment, then looked back at me. "Greg, it's not what it looks like." "It never is," I said, my tone cold. "Explain it then." She opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. "Marcus and I we were going over some client stuff. We had drinks, but that's all it was. And this?" I swiped to the next image, a close-up of them laughing together, his arm draped casually across her shoulders. Her voice trembled now. He got a little too comfortable. But I didn't want to make a scene. "A scene," I repeated, my voice rising. "Lisa, I heard you. I heard you call him Honeybee. That's what you called me." Her face crumpled, and for a moment, I thought she might tell the truth. But then she doubled down. "You're overreacting," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "It was just one night. I swear. I had a few drinks, and things got blurry. But nothing happened." "Nothing?" I snapped, my patience snapping like a brittle branch. "I have your texts, Lisa. I know about the hotel. I know about Marcus. I know about Ethan." Her mouth dropped open, her tears stopping midstream. "You, what? You think I wouldn't figure it out?" I said, stepping closer. "The messages, the spreadsheets, the audio recordings. Did you think you were that good at lying?" Lisa's voice broke, her composure shattering. "Greg, Stop," I said, cutting her off. "Don't waste your breath. I don't want excuses. I want the truth." For the first time, she looked genuinely afraid. Her hands trembled as she set the wine glass down. "Greg, please. Let me explain." "You've got one chance," I said, folding my arms. "One. And it better be the whole truth." She took a deep breath, her shoulders shaking. It started a few months ago, she admitted. Marcus, he was charming, and I felt invisible at home. But it didn't mean anything. I didn't mean for it to go this far. And Ethan? I pressed. Her voice dropped to a whisper. That was different. He offered me things Marcus couldn't. I let out a bitter laugh, shaking my head. Things like embezzlement? Lisa's eyes widened in panic. You don't understand, Greg. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like, I said, my voice deadly calm. Her silence told me everything I needed to know. Lisa crumbled into tears, but I felt nothing. I walked out of the kitchen, her sobs echoing behind me. There was nothing left to say. The lies were out in the open now, and the person I thought I loved was gone. After Lisa's breakdown in the kitchen, I couldn't look at her the same way. Her sobs echoed in my mind long after I left the room, but they didn't soften me. If anything, they fueled the fire. I needed answers, not just the half-truth she gave me, but the whole, ugly truth. The next morning, I waited until Lisa left the house to take the girls to school. Then, I opened my laptop, logging into the tracking software I'd set up. The evidence I already had, the texts, the photos, the audio, felt like the tip of an iceberg. What lay beneath it? That was what terrified me. The first revelation came when I combed through her emails more carefully. I'd seen the casual exchanges with Marcus and Ethan before, but this time, I looked deeper. Buried under the usual work memos and meeting schedules was a folder labeled innocuously, Accounts. I clicked it open. At first, it looked like standard financial spreadsheets, numbers and formulas that meant little to me. But the more I scrolled, the more suspicious it became. The entries didn't match the labels. Transfers were listed as marketing expenses or client gifts, but the amounts were staggering, tens of thousands of dollars funneled to unfamiliar accounts. My heart pounded as I opened another document, this one a series of emails between Lisa, Marcus, and Ethan. The language was careful, almost coded. Adjusted the budget for Q3, Marcus wrote. Shouldn't draw any attention. Lisa replied, perfect. I've smoothed out the discrepancies on my end. Discrepancies? I leaned back, staring at the screen. This wasn't just cheating. This was theft. Lisa wasn't just lying to me. She was committing fraud. And Marcus and Ethan were in on it. The next piece of the puzzle fell into place when I listened to another recorded call. It was Marcus this time, his voice smooth and confident. We'll move the funds again next quarter, he said. Lisa, make sure the reports are airtight. If anyone catches wind of this, they won't, Lisa replied, her voice firm. I've handled it before. Just make sure Ethan doesn't overstep. He knows the stakes, Marcus said. We're all in this together. Together. That word felt like acid in my stomach. They weren't just using her. They trusted her. She wasn't a pawn in their game. She was a player. I couldn't breathe as I pieced it all together. Lisa had gone beyond betraying me. She had betrayed herself, our family, and any shred of decency I thought she had left. The woman I married, the mother of my children, was gone, replaced by someone I didn't recognize. I knew I had to act, but I couldn't rush this. If I confronted her now, she'd deny it, twist the narrative, and try to manipulate me again. No, this wasn't just about me anymore. It was bigger than us, and I needed to be smart. The next day, I made 2 calls. The first was to Eric. I hadn't told him everything yet, but he knew enough to understand my urgency. Can you connect me with someone who deals with financial crimes? I asked, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. Eric didn't ask questions. I know a guy. I'll text you his info. The second call was to a lawyer. I explained the situation carefully, omitting any details that might get back to Lisa. My goal wasn't just to protect myself, it was to protect the girls. I need to ensure full custody, I told her. Whatever it takes. By the end of the week, I was sitting across from a federal investigator, handing over a USB drive containing every piece of evidence I'd gathered. The spreadsheets, the emails, the call logs, it was all there. The agent, a middle-aged man with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, flipped through the files with a practiced efficiency. This is damning, he said after a few minutes. You're saying your wife is directly involved? Yes, I said. my voice hard. And so are Marcus Reed and Ethan Turner. They've been funneling money through her for months. The agent nodded, jotting down notes. We'll investigate further. But you should know, this could get messy. If we move forward with charges, it'll be public. That's fine, I said. Just make sure they don't walk away from this. The waiting was the hardest part. Every day, I acted like nothing had changed. I smiled at Lisa when she walked through the door, helped the girls with their homework, and slept on the couch to give her space. All the while, I watched her, searching for any sign that she suspected what was coming. She didn't. She still thought she was in control, still thought her secrets were safe. It was almost impressive, the way she carried on like nothing had happened. But her confidence would be her downfall. The call came 2 weeks later. The investigator's voice was calm but firm. We're ready to move. The raid is scheduled for Friday. I hung up, my heart pounding. This was it, the moment everything would come crashing down. Lisa didn't know it yet, but her carefully constructed double life was about to collapse. And I would be there to watch. The restaurant was buzzing when I walked in, the hum of conversation blending with the clinking of glasses. It was the kind of upscale place Lisa loved. Dim lighting, sleek decor, and an air of exclusivity. I'd chosen it deliberately, knowing the public setting would make it harder for her to run or deflect. I spotted Lisa immediately, seated at a booth near the window. She looked radiant, dressed in a sleek black dress, her hair perfectly styled. She smiled when she saw me, but I could tell it didn't reach her eyes. She thought this was about us, about salvaging what was left of our marriage. She had no idea what was coming. "Greg," she said, standing to greet me. Her voice was warm, inviting, but I didn't return her embrace. "Lisa," I said, my tone neutral. "Thanks for meeting me." I gestured for her to sit as I slid into the booth across from her. She hesitated, her smile faltering for just a moment before she regained her composure. "Of course. I've been wanting to talk." "So have I said, keeping my voice steady. "But before we start, we're waiting for a couple more people." Her brow furrowed. More people? As if on cue, Marcus and Ethan entered the restaurant. They froze when they saw us, their eyes darting between me and Lisa. I waved them over, a small, tight smile on my face. Reluctantly, they approached the table. "What's going on?" Marcus asked, his tone wary. "Sit," I said, gesturing to the empty seats. "We need to have a conversation." Lisa's face had gone pale, her confident facade crumbling. "Greg, what is this?" I didn't answer her. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder, setting it on the table. "I've been doing some digging," I said, my voice calm but laced with steel, "and I found some interesting things. Care to explain these?" I opened the folder, spreading the evidence across the table. Photos, emails, financial spreadsheets. It was all there, laid bare for everyone to see. Marcus's face darkened as he scanned the documents, and Ethan's jaw tightened, his hand gripping the edge of the table. "This is ridiculous," Marcus said, his voice rising. "You're blowing things out of proportion." "Am I?" I countered, tapping a finger on one of the spreadsheets. "Because this looks a lot like embezzlement to me. And these emails? They're pretty damning." Lisa was silent, her eyes darting between me and the evidence. I could see the panic in her expression, the realization that her secrets were unraveling. "You've been siphoning money from the company for months," I continued, my voice cold. "Falsifying reports, redirecting funds to offshore accounts. And Lisa? She's been right there with you." "That's not true," Lisa finally said, her voice shaking. "Greg, Stop lying," I snapped, slamming my hand on the table. Heads turned, conversations quieting around us. "I have the proof, Lisa. You think I wouldn't find out?" The tension at the table was suffocating. Marcus leaned forward, his voice low and threatening. "What do you want, Greg? Money? To ruin us? Because if you think you can get away with this..." I cut him off with a bitter laugh. "Get away with this? Oh, I'm not the one who has to worry about that." As if on cue, the doors to the restaurant swung open, and a group of federal agents entered. Their presence was commanding, their badges glinting under the dim lights. The room fell silent as they approached our table. Marcus Reed and Ethan Turner, one of the agents, said, his voice firm, "You're under arrest for embezzlement and fraud." The color drained from Marcus's face, and Ethan's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Lisa stared in stunned silence as the agents cuffed them, reading them their rights. "This is a mistake," Marcus shouted as he was hauled to his feet. "You don't understand." "Oh, I think they understand perfectly," I said, leaning back in my seat. "You might want to call your lawyers." The agents turned to Lisa, but I held up a hand. "She'll have her time," I said, my voice cold. "She's not going anywhere." As Marcus and Ethan were escorted out, the restaurant erupted into murmurs and whispers. Lisa sat frozen, her hands trembling in her lap. "Greg," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "What have you done?" I leaned forward, my voice low and deliberate. "I protected my family. Something you forgot how to do." That night, as I walked out of the restaurant, I felt a strange sense of calm. The storm had finally broken, and Lisa's carefully constructed facade was in ruins. There was still more to come: divorce proceedings, custody battles. But for the first time in months, I felt like I had the upper hand. And I wasn't letting it go. The days following the restaurant confrontation were a blur of chaos. Marcus and Ethan's arrests made headlines, their mugshots plastered across news channels alongside reports of corporate fraud and embezzlement. The media dissected every detail, speculating about who else might have been involved. Lisa's name wasn't mentioned, yet, but I knew it was only a matter of time. Lisa, meanwhile, had retreated into herself. She moved through the house like a ghost, her once commanding presence reduced to whispered apologies and hollow attempts at reconciliation. She didn't know that the worst was still to come. It was during one of her desperate attempts to talk to me that the final piece of the puzzle fell into place. She caught me in the kitchen, her eyes red and swollen. "Greg, please," she said, her voice cracking. "I know I've hurt you, but I need to explain." I crossed my arms, leaning against the counter. "Then explain, Lisa. Tell me why you thought betraying me, betraying our family, was worth it." She hesitated, her hands twisting nervously. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this. Marcus, Ethan, they pulled me into it. I didn't have a choice." "You didn't have a choice?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You had a choice every step of the way, Lisa. And you chose to lie. You chose to cheat. You chose to help them steal." Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "It wasn't just about the money, Greg. It was about control. I felt powerless." Her words struck a nerve, but I didn't let it show. "Powerless?" I said. "So you thought stealing hundreds of thousands of dollars would fix that?" Her silence was answer enough. Later that night, I went back to the folder of evidence I'd gathered. Something about Lisa's explanation nagged at me. She was lying. I knew that much, but there was more she wasn't telling me. I combed through her emails again, looking for anything I might have missed. And then I found it. A series of drafts, saved but never sent. Emails addressed to both Marcus and Ethan, written in a tone far more confident than the Lisa I knew. "Marcus, if you don't increase my cut, I'll make sure HR gets a copy of your hotel bill. Ethan, your wife might be interested in seeing the transfers to that offshore account. I'm sure she'd love to hear where that money's been going." My hands trembled as I scrolled through the messages. They weren't threats yet, but they were clear evidence that Lisa had been planning to blackmail them. She hadn't been a pawn in their scheme. She'd been positioning herself as the queen, ready to take them down if they didn't give her what she wanted. The next day, I confronted her. I found her in the living room, staring blankly at the TV. She barely looked up when I entered the room. "Lisa," I said, my voice hard. "We need to talk." "What now?" she muttered, exhaustion lacing her voice. I tossed a printed copy of the drafts onto the coffee table. "Explain these." Her eyes widened as she scanned the pages, her face turning a sickly shade of pale. "Where did you get these?" she whispered. "Answer the question," I said. "You weren't just part of their scheme. You were planning to take them down, weren't you?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again, her hands trembling. It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" I demanded. You were going to extort them, Lisa. You were going to use this money to leave me, take the girls, and start over. Don't lie to me. Her silence was deafening. You used them, I continued, my voice rising. Just like you used me. You manipulated everyone, and for what? Money? Power? What did you think was going to happen, Lisa? Tears spilled down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her choices. She had built this house of lies, and now it was crumbling around her. At the custody hearing a week later, I presented the emails as evidence. Lisa sat across from me, her once confident demeanor replaced by shame and fear. The judge reviewed the documents, their expression grim. This is deeply troubling, Miss Thornton, the judge said. Your actions show a pattern of manipulation and deceit, not just against your husband, but against your employers and associates. Given the circumstances, I have no choice but to grant full custody of the children to Mr. Thornton. Lisa sobbed openly, pleading with the judge for leniency. But the decision was final. The court had seen her for who she really was, and there was no coming back from it. After the hearing, Lisa approached me in the hallway. Her eyes were puffy, her voice barely above a whisper. Greg, I'm sorry. For everything. I stared at her, the woman I had once loved more than anything, and felt nothing. It's too late, Lisa, I said, my voice hollow. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. She nodded, tears streaming down her face, and walked away without another word. The fallout from her betrayal was complete. Marcus and Ethan faced prison time. Lisa was left with nothing. No family, no job, no reputation. And me? I had my daughters, my dignity, and the knowledge that I had done everything I could to protect what mattered most. As I tucked Emma and Claire into bed that night, Emma looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. Will Mommy ever come back? She asked. Maybe someday, I said softly. But for now, it's just us. And that was enough. The days that followed the custody hearing felt both liberating and suffocating. The storm had passed, leaving behind an eerie quiet. Lisa was gone from our lives, her absence a palpable void that neither Emma nor Claire could fully understand. For me, her absence was a strange relief, but also a painful reminder of everything we had lost. Life moved on, as life always does. The girls adjusted better than I expected, their routines grounding them in a sense of normalcy. Mornings were filled with pancake breakfasts and chatter about school. Evenings were movie nights or trips to the park. On the surface, things seemed almost peaceful. But at night, when the house fell silent and the girls were asleep, the weight of it all came crashing down. I would sit at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where Lisa used to sit, her laughter and sharp wit echoing faintly in my memory. For better or worse, she had been a part of my life for so long that it felt unnatural to think of the future without her in it. I'd be lying if I said I didn't regret anything. I regretted not noticing the signs earlier, not asking the right questions, not being the husband she once needed. But most of all, I regretted that Emma and Claire would grow up knowing the truth about their mother one day. A truth I couldn't shield them from forever. That truth weighed heavily on me as I sat with my lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. You're making the right decision, she said, her voice kind but firm. This will give you and the girls a fresh start. A fresh start. The phrase sounded so clean, so easy. But there was nothing clean about picking up the shattered pieces of a life you thought you understood. Lisa, for her part, had tried to reach out. She sent letters, long and rambling, filled with apologies and promises to be better. I kept them in a drawer, unread. Her words couldn't undo what she'd done, and I wasn't ready to confront the possibility of forgiving her. Maybe I never would be. She wasn't the only one who had tried to reconnect. Marcus and Ethan's wives, both of whom had filed for divorce after the scandal broke, reached out to thank me for exposing the truth. They wanted to commiserate, to share their stories. But I declined. Their pain was their own, just as mine was mine. One night, months after the hearing, I found myself standing in the doorway of the girls' room, watching them sleep. Emma clutched her stuffed bunny, her chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Claire had kicked off her blanket, her tiny hand resting on the pillow. They were my world now, my reason for getting out of bed every morning, my anchor in the chaos. I knew I would do whatever it took to protect them, to give them the life they deserved. The next morning, Emma asked me the question I had been dreading. Daddy, when will Mommy come back? I paused, kneeling in front of her. Sweetheart, I said gently, Mommy loves you very much. But sometimes, grown-ups make mistakes, and they need time to fix them. Did Mommy make a mistake? She asked, her brow furrowing. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Yes, but it doesn't mean she doesn't love you. Emma seemed to accept that, though I could see the confusion lingering in her eyes. I hugged her tightly, whispering, You have me, and you have Claire, and no matter what, I will always be here for you. As time passed, the wounds began to heal. Slowly, piece by piece, I started to rebuild. I poured myself into my work, taking on new projects and finding solace in the rhythm of sanding wood and hammering nails. The girls became my light, their laughter and love reminding me that life could still be beautiful, even after so much had been lost. One evening, as the sun set over the backyard, I sat on the porch watching Emma and Claire play. Their giggles filled the air, unburdened by the weight of the past. In that moment, I realized something profound. Lisa's betrayal had broken me, but it hadn't destroyed me. I was still here, still standing, still capable of love and hope. Eventually, I opened one of Lisa's letters. Her handwriting was shaky, the words spilling across the page in a mix of desperation and regret. Greg, I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want you to know that I am sorry. For everything. For the lies, the betrayal, the pain I caused. I don't expect you to let me back into your life, but I hope one day you can find it in your heart to forgive me, not for my sake, but for yours. I folded the letter and placed it back in the drawer. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer yet. Maybe someday, but not now. For now, my focus was on the future, on Emma and Claire, on the life we were building together. As I tucked the girls into bed that night, Claire whispered, We love you, Daddy. I smiled, leaning down to kiss her forehead. I love you too, always. And for the first time in months, I felt a flicker of peace. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but it was mine to walk, and I would walk it with my head held high, for them, for myself, and for the promise of brighter days to come.